Hi, this is Holly from the Potomac Bead Company. Today I'm going to show you how to make the Viking knit bracelet. And as you can see in front of us, we have an example right here. And to do this, we're going to need some 24 gauge wire. You will need some heavier gauge wire towards the end once we're finishing. You'll also need some cones or bead caps and some sort of closure. We'll also be using with this project our V-shaped cutters and a draw plate. And there are options that you can do when you're working on this. You can either use what we call the Lazy Daisy. These are available in most of your Potomac Bead locations. Or you can simply use just a plain dowel rod or pencil. I'm going to try to show you both techniques today. And you are more than welcome to figure out which kind or which way that you are more comfortable working with this technique. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to show you how to work on the dowel rod to start the Viking knit project. And what you need is some kind of card. I'm using an old gift card from a local store. And what I've done is I've taken my 24 gauge wire and I've wrapped it around until I have 5 pieces here at the bottom. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to slide that off the card. And then with the longer tail that we have, I'm actually going to wrap that around a few times just to tighten it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to separate what we call the petals. And you should have 5 petals with this. Just like that. And they kind of make a loop there. And from here, what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to place the petal over the end of our dowel rod. And it's going to be a little difficult at first, but you'll get it just kind of sitting there hanging out, and we'll get started weaving our wire onto this part. And eventually this will be cut off once we're getting to the point of completion with our bracelet. Okay, so to continue with our Viking knit, what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've put another piece of the 24 gauge wire through one of our loops of our petal. The next thing that we're going to do is take the other end of our second piece of wire. We're actually going to go down through the next loop in our petal, just like that. And we're actually going to pull it behind the wire, and when we're doing this, you should kind of make what looks almost like a lowercase cursive E, if you can see that there. And that's going to be the basis for all of our stitches here with the Viking knit. From there, we go on to the next petal. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to go through the next loop. And it's going to look kind of funky at first when you're working on this, and you're going to think that it's not going to turn out pretty decent, but in the end, once we draw it through the draw plate, it'll all come out okay. So we just continue around the whole way around the dowel, and we make those little lowercase e's going down and pulling that tail behind to make the little lowercase e. And the great thing with wire is you can kind of manipulate it to where you need it to go. So if it's not exactly going where you want it to go, you can go back and take care of that. Alright, so I think we have one more, and then we'll start on the next row. Okay, so just like that. We have our little E's going the whole way around our dowel rod, and it's going to look a little messy at first, and it's going to take a little coordination, but you can get it. Alright, and so from here we're going to start our second row, and you can see you've got the little E. If they're kind of bunching up, you want to go in with your fingers and kind of pull them apart. But from here, instead of going into the loop, we're going to actually go behind our little lowercase e that we made, just like that, and we're going to pull that down So you're actually interlocking and you're continuing to make those little lowercase e's. Okay, and you just continue to do this until you get it to the length that you want it to be. If you're finding that it's hard to get it behind your loops, you can pull that out a little bit and make that little lowercase e. I'll do just a couple more so you get the hang of it. And it just goes on and on, just like that. So getting it started is pretty much the hardest part of this, and then it just moves pretty smooth from there. So that is the basic Viking knit stitch on the dowel rod. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to start the Viking knit on this Lazy Daisy tool. And this is a really cool tool that you can use. I don't find that it's absolutely necessary to have when you have other options, but this is a great way to kind of take, to get it started a little easier than you would with the dowel rod. What this does is this has this little flower petal type end on it that is removable, and what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've looped and made my little lowercase e's the whole way around on the petal part of it. And from here, then all you're going to do is similar to the dowel rod technique. You're just going to go behind that little lowercase e that you had before, and like I said, this part will be trimmed off towards the completion of our bracelet. So we've gone behind, and again we're just going to pull that wire down the whole way around and make those little lowercase e's. I'm using the 24 gauge wire because it is a thinner gauge wire and it is easier to work with. You are absolutely welcome to try other gauges of wire, but this is probably going to be one of the easier gauges to work with until you're used to doing the technique. And towards the end, like I said, we will be using a heavier gauge, either a 20 or an 18 gauge, to do the closures and finishing on it. So we just continue around and around, looping behind that little E that we've made. And if you get to a point where your wire is a little bit kinky, you can always go in with the nylon jaw pliers if you have them and straighten it out. Just remembering that it will make your wire just a little bit more brittle. Okay, and again, this is all you're going to do. You're going to continue to go around and go behind your loop that you made. And that's what you're going to do for the entire length of your bracelet. Okay, so as you can see, I have gotten several rows of the knitting done to the point where I'm ready to add another piece of wire. You can see that my tail is getting a little bit smaller and it's going to get harder and harder to work with here. So we're going to go ahead and add in a new wire. So what you do is you take another length of your 24 gauge wire, and what I do is I'm going to just mimic the last loop that we just did. So I'm actually going to take the new piece of wire, I'm going to take that behind like I'm making my little lowercase e. If I can get it in there. And if you're using the Lazy Daisy, there is an additional little tool that comes with it, and you're more than welcome to use a push pin because that's basically what it is. But this helps you if you need to go in and kind of raise up the knitting from your dowel or from your Lazy Daisy in order to get behind there. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone behind that loop, and I'm just going to continue to pull it around. And I'm going to take it down below like I'm making my lowercase e. little awkward the first couple times you do it. And then just keep pulling it through. And then this little piece that's left, I'm actually going to take it back. Just like that. And from here, I'm ready to continue on with my knit. Just go behind the next loop. Continuing to make my little lowercase e's. Okay, so we've gotten a good distance on our Viking knit here, and I wanted to go ahead and show you how we finish it off. We're almost to the point where we're ready to pull it through the draw plate, but not quite. Once you've done as many rows as you'd like and you've gotten it to the length that you'd like, you can either remove it from the dowel rod, or in the case of the Lazy Daisy, you just pull that little flower part off the top, and we would go from there. So what I do is I've taken another length of, this is an 18 gauge wire, and do about 6 inches. And what I do is I pull the knit together, and what I do is I go through each of the loops, try to catch as many of those loops as I can with my 18 gauge wire, and then I'm going to bring it all together and wrap the 18 gauge around itself to start the finishing part of it. As you can see, I've gone ahead and I've wrapped that 18 gauge wire around there. I'm going to do the same exact thing with this other end, but first we have to take that little flower off. So I'm going to go in with my cutters, and I'm going to cut the wire just on top of the flower. And if you need to kind of finagle it to get into the wire, you can, just like that. You want to make sure that you're just cutting on top of that Lazy Daisy, and that you're not cutting your actual knit below that. So once you've made it the whole way around, you should be able to kind of loosen those up and pull that right off. Whoops, missed one. Just like that. And then what we'll do is we'll come in with another piece of our 18 gauge wire, and we'll finish this end, and we'll be ready to pull it through the draw plate. So we have both of our lengths of 18 gauge wire at either end, and this is what we're going to use when we attach our cones. But first, before we do that, we're going to pull this through the draw plate. You can see that the weave itself is a little bit uneven and kind of messy looking, but as soon as we start drawing this through the draw plate, you're going to see that that's going to come together and become even and look really great. Okay, what you do is you pick up your draw plate, and you're going to go through the very first section, and you may need some assistance from your pliers by grabbing a hold of that 18 gauge and pulling it through. So you pull that through just like that, and you can see that as it comes out the other end, it's already looking very nice and even. And if you would like it to be thinner and longer, you just continue going through each hole until you get it to the desired width or length that you'd like it to be. But I'm thinking that that looks pretty good just like that. So I finished using my draw plate, and as you can see, we have some cones here, and this is how we're going to finish the Viking knit bracelet. With one end of our 18 gauge, we're going to go ahead and slip on one of those cones, just like that. From here, we're going to bend the 18 gauge wire, and we're going to make a loop in that with some round nose pliers. For instructions on how to do that, be sure to check out our other YouTube video on how to make loops. So here's two examples of our finished Viking knit project, and you can see over here that we have those large loops that we did with the 18 gauge wire. And wanted to show you some of the options. You are only limited by your imagination and as far as what color or type of wire that you want to use. In addition to that, the finishes on your findings. You can use copper, silver plated, pewter, anything that you'd like you can do. This is another great example of adding some additional beads into that. If you just want a section, a smaller piece of the Viking knit in your project, you can always add your length with some extra beads that accent it really well. But this has been the basics of making the Viking knit, and we used 2 different techniques, one with the Lazy Daisy and with the dowel rod. Try them both out, see which one you like. This is Holly from the Potomac Bead Company.